Israelis don't care about condemnation. They're self-righteous and complacent. These people cannot be persuaded. You cannot appeal to their better nature when they don't have a better nature.
The coordinates were given 17 times. How could anybody claim that they didn't know what they were doing? Israel's policy is shoot first and weep afterwards. Oh, did we hit children? What a terrible tragedy. Nobody believes you anymore.
You really think the American people need Mr. Netanyahu to hold up his Looney Tune Daffy Duck cartoons to explain to us diplomacy with Iran?
Sometimes you have to bring in a Yahoo, a Netanyahu.
Well, let me show you. Brought a diagram for you. Here's a diagram. This is a bomb. This is a fuse. Where should a red line be drawn? A red line should be drawn right here.
The foreign ministry would do well to watch Bill Maher to learn how to sell Israel's case to a TV audience.
Watch it. If I'm prime minister, you'll get the job.
I could roll that way, I'm telling you. If the Jews want to pay me, I love HBO, but I mean the other Jews.
Well, the main question is about Netanyahu. Are you aware of the public statements of Benjamin Netanyahu's government, himself and several leading ministers, where they have stated in the most brutal and cold-blooded terms their belief that it is legitimate to kill Palestinians, including innocent women and children? Let me just give you a quick flavour of some of the statements that have been made. This is the Defence Minister, Moshe Yaalon, talking just a couple of weeks ago. Israel is going to hurt Lebanese civilians, to include kids of the family. We went through a very long discussion. We did it then. We did it in the Gaza Strip. We are going to do it in any round of hostilities in the future. That's the Defence Minister. This is the Military Chief of Staff, Benny Gantz. The next round of violence will be worse and see this suffering increase. He headed up the military assaults on Gaza, the last two. This is the Minister for Education in the Netanyahu government. There will never be a peace plan with the Palestinians. I will do everything in my power to make sure they never get a state. He also said, if you catch terrorists, you simply have to kill them. I've killed a lot of Arabs in my life, and there's no problem with that. This is the Minister for Justice. Palestinians are all enemy combatants. This also includes the mothers of the martyrs. They should follow their sons. Nothing would be more just. They should go, as should the physical homes in which they raised the snakes. Otherwise, more little snakes will be raised there. That's the Israeli Minister for Justice.
Apparently time was also running out 19 years ago.
The most dangerous of these regimes is Iran. If this regime, or its despotic neighbor Iraq, were to acquire nuclear weapons, this could presage catastrophic consequences. Only the United States can lead this vital international effort to stop the nuclearization of terrorist states. Time is running out. We have to act.
In 2002, oh, shalom.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And the reverberations of what happens with the collapse of Saddam's regime could very well create an implosion in a neighbor regime like Iran.
Or the opposite. One thing is certain. The in-chamber response to this speech was by far the longest blowjob a Jewish man has ever received.
The hard fact is that so long as Saddam remains in power, he threatens the well-being of his people, the peace of his region, the security of the world. The best way to end that threat, once and for all, is with a new Iraqi government.
2013, the unaccountable money in the Pentagon's coffers had reached $8.5 trillion.
The latest scandal to hit Washington comes from a report revealing the Pentagon misplaced $8.5 trillion. One former Pentagon employee, Linda Woodford, said she spent 15 years there falsifying financial records.
$8.5 trillion unaccounted for?
It's a lot of money. This is the kind of thing that you would think would bring Capitol Hill to a screeching halt. There'd be hearings kind of almost daily. You'd have various committees looking into it. None of that.
Netanyahu worked inside nuclear smuggling ring. Well, he was the Israeli end of this smuggling node, working with heli trading company.
He names Benjamin Netanyahu as being an employee of Heli Trading Company, which was the node in Israel, including arms. Here's a person who was supposed to be working as a furniture company executive. The FBI uncovering a multi-node network. This one happened to be centered in California. Milco was a company that was incorporated in 1972. Ringleader who is running this has been identified as Arnon Milchan, a person any American knows for his movie productions such as Pretty Woman, sending 800 Krytrons, which are dual-use items that can be used to trigger nuclear weapons. Without the proper export licenses, 800 Krytrons to Israel. Netanyahu is also the key contact for this particular project. When he was discovered doing that, he skipped bail in the mid-1980s and disappeared until he was picked up by Interpol in the early part of 2000, Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu was interesting because he quickly became untouchable. He became the assistant to the U.S. ambassador in Washington, D.C., so suddenly he had diplomatic immunity.
And I barred him from the State Department.
במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אמריקה זה דבר שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, להזיז לכיוון הנכון. אתה לא מפחד מהעולם, ביבי. במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אמריקה זה דבר שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, להזיז לכיוון הנכון. יש כאלה, אז נניח שאומרים משהו. 80% מהאמריקאים תומכים בה. זה אבסורד, יש לנו שם תמיכה כזאת, ואנחנו אומרים מה נעשה עם ה... לא פחדתי לתמד שם. לא פחדתי להתאבד עם קלינטון, לא פחדתי להתאבד עם הרוב. מה היו הסכמים?
We need to make the Iranians pay a price in Syria. We need to make the Russians pay a price.
We make them pay the price by killing Russians,
yes,
and killing Iranians.
Yes, covertly. So you don't tell the world about it, right? I want to scare Assad. So I want to go after his presidential guard. I want to bomb his offices in the middle of the night. I want to destroy his presidential aircraft on the ground. I want to destroy his presidential helicopters. I want to make him think we're coming after him, right?
I think Assange should be assassinated, actually. I think Obama should put out a contract and maybe use a drone or something.
Stop, Mr. Assange. We're looking at that right now. The Justice Department is taking a look at that.
One person close to the debate said to me this week that it's no longer a question of if, it's a question of how we go after Saddam Hussein.
I'm amazed by how stupid he is. His idiocy sends your young daughters and sons to go die overseas for no reason whatsoever.
The solution is to be serious about being engaged in the Middle East, not to go back in militarily to Iraq, but not to pull out 100% of Iraq or Afghanistan and leave them to go back to the same cycle that led to 9/11.
Perpetual war in the Middle East.
No, perpetual.
Bill Kristol, and how he's just such a warmonger. He always seems to be calling for intervention somewhere. He continues, quote, "A war-weary public can be awakened and rallied. Indeed, events are right now doing the awakening. Let's do propaganda to try to get the United States in another war." He just used the word awakened to describe getting people to go to war, as if that's like an enlightenment moment.
We don't have enough money in this country to pay people who are unemployed unemployment benefits, according to the Republican Party, and yet we can continue to send for tens of thousands more troops in Afghanistan when we see what's happening to those troops when they come back. The incredible spike in trade. That's pathetic. How is?
I'm amazed by how stupid he is. His idiocy sends your young daughters and sons to go die overseas for no reason whatsoever.
Israel wants peace. I want peace.
You have the crazy ISIS in Syria and elsewhere. You have the crazy Saudis, and you also have, of course, the crazy Israelis. In the case of Israel, they've just elected the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan into office. Israeli mentality, it has nothing to do with the real world. 75% of Israelis support Israel's retention of the Jordan Valley. 75% of Israelis support keeping all of Jerusalem for Israel. That's not two states. That's one state plus for Israel and a garbage dump for the Palestinians. That's the Israeli electorate. That's the reality. If you want to understand Israel as an American, all you have to do is look at the American South before the Civil Rights era. The same meanness, the same vicious racism, the same sense of superiority. But in the case of Israelis, it's not just superiority when it comes to Arabs. There's this kind of Jewish supremacy, Jewish superiority when it comes to everyone. That's why when Mr. Netanyahu came to Congress, the first people to back out, the first Congress people to back out, were the Congressional Black Caucus, because they immediately sensed that this is not just a Jewish supremacist, this is a vicious, filthy racist who was slighting the President of the United States because he was African American. It's a very simple fact. Israel has a cost-free occupation. The Europeans pay the bills in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority does the dirty work. It imprisons Palestinians, it tortures the Palestinians. That's called security cooperation. And the United States protects Israel diplomatically at the UN and other international forums. And so why should the Israelis withdraw? They get to have their cake. They build these luxurious communities in the occupied Palestinian territories, stealing the water resources, stealing a lot of the most arable Palestinian land. They get to relocate with government subsidies in the occupied Palestinian territories, and they get nothing and they lose nothing. It's a cost-free occupation. It's probably the first cost-free occupation in the history of humanity. There's only one way to bring about a two-state settlement, and that's to make Israel pay the price for its illegal, immoral, and inhuman occupation of Palestinian territory that now has gone on for nearly a half-century.
In London alone, there are about 2,000 who are active, and another 5,000 won the list. In his 1994 book, The Other Side of Deception, Ostrovsky reveals that the Mossad maintain over 100 safe houses in London alone. They fulfill many different roles.
Here to draw attention to the fact that Israel has committed war crimes year after year after year. And last year in Gaza over 2,000 people were killed. Women and children were deliberately targeted by the Israeli government. And Netanyahu gave those orders.
I'm 76 and this has been going on since I was a small girl.
There's lots of children back home who are imprisoned because they throw stones at bulldozers, fighting for their homes. And here's Netanyahu who's killing and thieving, and he's not punished. So I just feel sorry for the children.
It's unbelievable that Netanyahu can still come to this country even though 100,000 people have signed a petition for his arrest.
I'm here today because I'm against the illegal occupation by Israel of the West Bank and the imprisoning of the Gaza people in the Gaza Strip.
This isn't just a protest today against the visit of a war criminal. It's also a protest against the links between Britain and Israel and Netanyahu. I mean, Israel wouldn't be able to conduct its murderous foreign policy if it wasn't for the support of Britain and the other Western powers.
How can you be a citizen of the United States, the country that has generated more violence and militarism in the world over the last 5 or 6 decades, and say, look at those people over there, they are incredibly violent? When you send your military for 6 straight decades into other countries to bomb them, kill their children and women and innocent men, lots of bodies and corpses that have been piled up in the name of Christianity and Judaism as well. West Bank and Gaza for the last 50 years motivated in part by extremist views of Judaism or the wars in Europe or the fact that there were generals in the United States saying we have to go and invade and destroy Iraq, a country of 26 million people, because our God is bigger. Lots of religions, not just Islam, produce violence. You get to ignore the responsibility that your own government has for the violence and instability in the world by saying, look, it's that primitive religion over there that's to blame.
In the history of Netanyahu's political career, he has never made a single statement which didn't turn out to be a lie. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I think when reality is ridiculous, we have no choice but to acknowledge it. Every statement Netanyahu makes turns out to be a lie. He's an extreme right-wing, racist, and neoliberal leader.
Why can't Jews and Arabs live together?
Jewish settlers taking over a Palestinian home, dumping the furniture in the garden.
Israel wants peace. I want peace. Children are not cannon fodder.
The Israelis were given the precise GPS coordinates. They knew exactly what was going on there, and in spite of that, this has happened. We again say enough civilians, enough women, enough children. They have suffered quite enough in this appalling conflict.
The disproportionate amount of women and children killed in this situation is a violation of all the spiritual beauty that Judaism stands for. The respect for life, the fact that if you save one life, you save the universe. All this blown out of the window. And blown out of the window, as I saw, by the arrival of 1,200,000 extremely right-wing former citizens of the Soviet Union.
USAID has given more to Israel than it has to any other country in the Middle East, helping to build libraries, medical centers, and universities.
Right now, they don't have to compromise because they get backing from the United States no matter what they do.
In a stunning interview that aired Monday on an Israeli investigative program, Milchan detailed how he was recruited in the 1960s to Israel's Bureau of Scientific Relations, where he helped gather technology to further Israel's still unacknowledged nuclear program.
Arnon Milchan, I helped Israeli spy agency, has come out and admitted that he secretly helped Israel develop its nuclear weapons program by stealing these secrets from the United States.
With actor Robert De Niro, who was also featured in the Israeli television program.
I did ask him once, we spoke about something, and he told me that he was an Israeli and that he of course would do these things for his country.
The fact is that although Milchan has been living in the US since the 80s, he has never given up his Israeli citizenship, nor has he become an American citizen. He is avidly devoted to Israel and leading.
One of the marks of great achievement is to remember where you came from. Arnon has never forgot where he came from. He came from Israel, he comes back to Israel, he invests in Israel. He invests not only in the business sense, but also in the emotional, deeply personal way that he's been attached to Israel and Israeli projects. Remembered his country, remembered his roots, remembered his friends, and I consider myself lucky to be one of them.
While also obtaining military secrets.
You know what? I did it for my country, and I'm proud of it.
Proud of it. Milchan was recruited as a spy by Israel's current president, Shimon Peres, in the 1960s. He was suspected of being a spy after one of his executives was indicted in 1985 for basically stealing nuclear materials, but only now did he confirm it.
He spent years as an Israeli secret agent and arms dealer.